When my hairdresser wrote "help me" on the mirror with her lipstick, I froze. At first I thought she was joking, but then I heard crying. Soft, broken crying coming from the basement below the salon. I knew something terrible was happening. I wish I had walked away that day. I wish I never opened that basement door, because what I found down there still keeps me awake at night. Before I tell you everything, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. You're not going to believe what happened next. My name is Ava Morgan. I'm 27, and a few months ago I moved to a small town called Maple Hollow. I needed a fresh start after a messy breakup in Chicago. I left behind my apartment, my friends, and the noise of the city. I just wanted peace. I moved in with my mom, Diane, who's the kind of woman who thinks everything can be fixed with hot tea and a good talk. She kept telling me I needed to get out more, meet new people, start feeling like myself again. One morning, she handed me a coupon and said, "Go get your hair done, honey. You've been hiding too long." That's how I ended up at a small place called Lena's Beauty Corner. It sat on the corner of Main Street, right between a thrift shop and an old diner. The sign outside was faded, but the inside looked warm and welcoming. When I stepped in, the air smelled like coconut shampoo and fresh coffee. The walls were painted soft pink, and there were fairy lights around the mirrors. A woman about my age greeted me with a nervous smile. "Hi, I'm Lena. You must be Ava, right?" "Yeah," I said, smiling back. "My mom told me to come here. Said you're the best in town." Lena laughed lightly, but her eyes didn't match her smile. "Your mom's sweet. Have a seat. What are we doing today?" As she started combing my hair, we talked about small things, work, the weather, how quiet the town was. Her voice was calm, but I noticed her hands trembled every time the scissors clicked. There were no other customers, no sound except for the low hum of a hairdryer in the back room. It felt peaceful, but also strangely tense. At one point, I caught her reflection in the mirror. She wasn't looking at my hair. She was looking at the mirror itself, almost studying it. Her eyes darted toward the door behind us. Trying to lighten the mood, I said, "So, how long have you had this place?" She answered softly, "Too long." Then she smiled again, forcing it this time. Something in her tone sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know why, but it felt like there was something she wasn't telling me. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just tired. I looked down at my phone, scrolling through messages from my mom. Everything felt normal, until Lena suddenly stopped cutting. The air seemed to change. I looked up, and her eyes in the mirror met mine. There was fear in them, real fear. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the beginning of the worst day of my life. Lena's scissors froze halfway through a strand of my hair. The room felt like it stopped breathing. I looked up and saw her reflection staring back at me through the mirror. Her face had gone pale, and her hands were trembling harder now. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking through me, at something only she could see. I tried to laugh it off. "Everything okay?" I asked, forcing a smile. But she didn't answer. Instead, she leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't scream." My heart started pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The kind of pounding that makes your fingers tingle and your throat tighten. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Lena slowly turned the hairdryer on full blast, the loud hum filling the air like static. Then, keeping her back to me, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a red lipstick, and began to write something across the mirror. The lipstick dragged across the glass, shaky and quick, letters forming in the steam. When she stepped aside, I read the words, "Help me, basement." For a few seconds, I just stared. My mind couldn't process it. I wanted to believe I was misunderstanding, that it was some weird joke or promotion for Halloween, but the way her hands shook told me it wasn't. I looked at her in the mirror again. Her eyes were glassy with tears. She shook her head fast, almost begging me to stay calm. Her lips moved silently. "Please, don't react." My stomach twisted into a knot. I wanted to ask what she meant, but then I heard it. A sound so faint, I thought it was my imagination at first. A quiet, muffled cry coming from below us. It sounded like someone trying to scream but being too weak to do it. It came again. A soft, heartbreaking whimper, then another. I froze in my chair. The sound was coming from under the floor, from the basement. I looked at Lena, but she had turned away, pretending to fix my hair. Her movements were stiff and robotic. I could see tears collecting at the corners of her eyes. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking into the chair. The walls of the salon suddenly felt smaller, the lights too bright, the air too thick. "Lena," I whispered, my voice shaking. "What's going on?" She didn't answer. She just mouthed one word, "Go." I felt torn. Every part of me wanted to get up and run, but there was something about the fear in her eyes that told me she wasn't just in trouble. Someone else was down there, someone who needed help. The crying grew louder for a moment, and then stopped, like whoever it was had been silenced. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed against my chest. I glanced toward the back of the salon. There was a narrow door behind a curtain, half hidden by a shelf stacked with towels. I hadn't noticed it before. I looked back at Lena. Her breathing was uneven now. She dropped her comb, and when she bent to pick it up, she whispered so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. "He's coming back soon." My blood ran cold. I didn't know who she was talking about, but the fear in her voice made it clear she was terrified of him. I tried to act normal, picking up my phone from my lap. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely type. I sent a quick text to my mom. "At the salon. Something's wrong. Call 911. Then I set my phone on silent and slid it into my pocket. Lena forced a smile and said loudly, "Almost done," as if to cover up what she had just said. I played along. "Looks great," I said, my voice cracking. My reflection didn't look like me anymore. It looked like someone trapped in a nightmare. The sound of footsteps suddenly echoed from outside the back door. Slow, heavy, male. Lena's face drained of all color. She dropped her scissors, and they clattered against the floor. The door behind the curtain rattled once, then fell silent. Whoever it was hadn't come in yet, but they were close. Lena whispered urgently, "You need to leave, please." Her eyes darted toward the front door, but my legs wouldn't move. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but curiosity, no, something deeper than that, kept me rooted in place. If there were people crying in that basement, I couldn't walk away. The footsteps faded for a moment. I used that chance to stand up slowly, pretending to stretch. My knees were weak, but I smiled like everything was fine. "I'm just going to use the restroom before I go," I said softly. Lena looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. She didn't try to stop me, but she shook her head slightly, silently pleading for me not to. I stepped toward the hallway anyway. The floor creaked under my shoes, and the air back there felt colder, damp even. I could feel a faint draft coming from somewhere below. The crying started again. It was louder this time, desperate. I reached the end of the hallway and saw it. A narrow stairwell behind a supply shelf, almost hidden from view. The smell of dust and mold drifted up from the dark space below. That's when it hit me. Lena wasn't asking for help because she was trapped. She was asking for help because someone else was, and I was the only one who'd heard them. I stood in the hallway staring at the narrow stairwell that led into darkness. The crying from below had stopped, but the silence that replaced it was even worse. Every instinct I had told me to leave, to walk out of that salon and never look back, but something deep inside refused to let me go. Someone was down there, and they needed help. I took a slow breath and looked back toward the salon. Lena was still at her station, pretending to sweep hair off the floor. Her hands were shaking, and she kept glancing at the front door as if expecting someone to walk in. When our eyes met, she gave a tiny shake of her head, mouthing the same word again, "Go." I didn't listen. I pulled out my phone and texted my mom again. "Call the police now. I think someone's trapped here." My hands trembled so much that it took me 2 tries to hit send. I turned off the sound and flashlight, slipping the phone into my back pocket. Then I took a step down the stairs. The first step groaned under my foot. I froze, waiting for any sound from upstairs. Nothing. I took another. The smell hit me next. Damp air mixed with something metallic and sour, like rust or old blood. My throat tightened, but I kept going. The staircase was narrow and steep, barely wide enough for one person. The walls were unfinished. the paint peeling off in chunks. I could hear the faint hum of a generator somewhere below. My chest felt tight, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Halfway down, I heard voices. A man's voice, low, angry, and close. "You messed up again, Lena. Do you think I don't notice when one of them cries too loud?" Lena's voice followed, trembling. "I'm sorry. I'm trying. Please don't hurt them. You just what?" he snapped. "You're lucky you're still useful." My stomach turned. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. Every cell in my body screamed to go back upstairs, but I couldn't. Not after hearing that. I crouched low and peeked around the corner at the bottom of the stairs. The light was dim, flickering from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. I could see a concrete floor, a workbench covered in tools, and metal chains fixed to the wall. And then I saw them. 6 girls, sitting close together, chained by their wrists and ankles. Their clothes were torn, their faces streaked with dirt. My breath caught when I looked closer. They all looked the same. Not just similar, identical. Same hair color, same face shape, same eyes. Each one looked exactly like me. For a second, I thought my mind had snapped. I blinked hard, but the image didn't change. 6 versions of myself stared back, their terrified eyes locking onto mine. One of them whispered, "Help us." My whole body went numb. I stumbled back a step, bumping into the wall. The noise echoed through the basement, and the man turned around. He was tall and broad, wearing a grease-stained apron. His face was rough, and his eyes were cold and calculating. "Who's there?" he barked. I ducked behind the corner, pressing my hand over my mouth to stop from gasping. My heart was racing so hard I could barely breathe. I could hear his heavy footsteps coming closer. "Lena, did you bring someone here?" he growled. "No," she said quickly, her voice breaking. "There's no one." "You're lying," he said. I glanced toward the girls again. They were watching me silently, eyes wide with hope and fear. I knew if I didn't act now, none of us would make it out. I spotted a set of old keys hanging on a hook near the stairs. I grabbed them quietly and slid them into my pocket. Then I looked for anything I could use as a weapon. There was a rusted wrench on the floor near a broken shelf. I picked it up, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The man moved toward Lena, grabbing her arm. "If someone's here, you'll pay for it," he snarled. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't do this," she begged. That's when I made my choice. I wasn't leaving her or those girls behind. I stepped out from behind the wall, my voice shaking but loud. "Let her go." He turned, his eyes narrowing when he saw me. For a second, he looked stunned. "You," he said slowly. "You're the one. The real one." Lena gasped. I didn't understand what he meant, but the way he said it made my blood run cold. He dropped Lena's arm and took a step toward me. I tightened my grip on the wrench, every muscle in my body ready to fight or run. Behind him, I saw the girls again, my own face multiplied 6 times, staring at me in silent terror. One of them whispered, "Please don't let him take you." And then it hit me. Whatever he had been doing down here, I wasn't just a bystander. I was the final piece of whatever nightmare he'd been building. I backed up toward the stairs, ready to run, but his hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was iron. "You're not leaving," he said. "Not this time." I swung the wrench with all my strength. It connected with his shoulder, and he stumbled, shouting in pain. I ran for the girls, fumbling with the keys. Chains rattled as I unlocked the first one. Lena, now free from his grasp, grabbed the wrench from the floor and turned toward him. "Run!" she screamed. The girls started pulling against their chains as I unlocked another. The man roared, lunging toward me again. Lena stepped in front of him, swinging the wrench with all her strength. That moment changed everything. I realized this wasn't just about escaping. It was about ending something truly evil. And no matter what it took, I wasn't leaving without them. The wrench hit the man's arm with a sharp crack, and he howled, stumbling backward into the wall. The sound of metal chains clanking filled the air as the girls started crying out, begging to be freed. The whole basement erupted into chaos. The flickering light, the echo of screaming, the pounding of my heartbeat thudding in my ears like drums of war. I dropped to my knees beside the third girl, trying to unlock her chain with shaking hands. The keys were old and rusted, and every second felt like an hour. Lena's voice broke through the noise. "Ava, go, take them and go." She swung the wrench again, this time hitting the man square in the chest. He grunted, grabbing the wrench from her and shoving her hard against the wall. Her body hit with a thud, and she slid to the floor, gasping. "Stop!" I yelled, rushing toward her, but he turned on me with eyes that didn't look human anymore. They were wild and full of something dark. Obsession. "You don't understand," he said through clenched teeth. "You're perfect. She finally found you. Who are you?" I shouted, backing away. He laughed, but it wasn't the laugh of a sane man. "I'm what she needed me to be. I made her a promise. And now it's almost done." My stomach twisted. "What are you talking about?" He pointed toward the chained girls, his expression full of pride. "Those were the mistakes. She couldn't get it right before. But then Lena brought you here. You're the one. The original." I stared at him, not understanding. The words didn't make sense. The original for what? His face softened in a way that made my blood run cold. "For her, my mother. You look just like her when she was your age." The pieces began to fall together in a horrifying way. Lena had said, "He's coming back soon." The crying, the fear, the 6 girls who looked exactly like me. He had been trying to recreate his mother, kidnapping women who looked like her, experimenting with something twisted and unspeakable. Lena coughed, her voice weak but desperate. "He's sick, Ava. He thinks if he can bring her back, everything will be okay again." The man snapped his head toward her. "Quiet!" he roared, raising his hand as if to hit her. Without thinking, I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a broken piece of pipe, and threw it at his head. It missed, but it distracted him long enough for Lena to crawl away. I darted back toward the wall, unlocking another girl. She fell into my arms, sobbing. "Get up," I whispered. "We're getting out of here." The man turned back toward me, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. His voice dropped to a chilling calm. "You can't save them. You're not supposed to. You were meant to replace them." My breath hitched. "You're insane." He smiled. "Maybe, but she'll finally be proud of me when she sees you." He lunged. I grabbed the wrench Lena had dropped earlier and swung with everything I had left. It connected with his jaw, and he fell to the floor with a crash. I didn't wait to see if he got up. I ran to the last girl still chained, fumbling with the keys. My fingers were slick with sweat, slipping on the metal, but finally the lock clicked open. Lena was struggling to her feet, blood running down the side of her face. "Ava, go upstairs," she gasped. "I'll hold him." "No," I said. "You're coming with us." She shook her head. "He'll follow if I leave. Get them out, please." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I knew she wasn't asking. She was begging. I nodded, my throat tight, and turned toward the stairs. "Come on," I shouted to the girls. They moved like ghosts, silent and terrified, clutching each other's arms as we ran toward the stairwell. The moment my foot hit the first step, a loud growl echoed behind us. I turned to see the man rising again, blood on his face, eyes blazing with fury. He grabbed Lena by the hair and dragged her back. "You ruined everything," he shouted. "I couldn't leave her. I couldn't." I turned around and charged down the steps, slamming into him with all my strength. He lost his grip on her and stumbled back. Lena grabbed his arm, twisting it, and together we pushed him toward the wall. He fought like a wild animal, throwing punches, clawing, screaming. I swung the wrench again, this time hitting the side of his head. He fell hard, hitting the concrete floor and going still. His chest rose once, then stopped. The room went silent. The flickering bulb buzzed faintly overhead. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body shook uncontrollably, adrenaline flooding my veins. Lena dropped to her knees beside him, sobbing, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then I remembered the girls. "We have to go," I said, grabbing her hand. She didn't resist this time. Together, we helped the girls up the stairs, one by one, until we reached the salon. The moment I saw daylight through the front window, tears filled my eyes. I stumbled outside, pulling my phone from my pocket and dialing 911. My voice broke as I told the operator everything: the basement, the chains, the man, the girls. Within minutes, sirens filled the air, police cars swarmed the street, officers rushed inside while paramedics checked the girls. Lena sat on the curb beside me, a blanket around her shoulders. Her hands were still shaking, her eyes empty. One of the officers approached. "We found him," he said quietly. "He's gone." I looked at Lena, expecting relief, but she just stared at the ground. "He was my brother," she whispered. "I tried to stop him for years. He made me bring people here, said he'd kill me if I didn't. I thought if I played along, I could find a way out. But no one ever came. Until you. I didn't know what to say. I just took her hand and held it. We sat there in silence while the flashing red and blue lights washed over us. The officers led the girls to safety. They looked at me as they passed. My own face reflected 6 times, each pair of eyes filled with gratitude and fear. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I hadn't just survived. I had stepped into something I could never unsee, something that would live with me forever. The next few days passed in a blur. Reporters filled the streets of Maple Hollow, flashing cameras outside the salon that had turned into a crime scene. The small town buzzed with gossip, but behind all the headlines and whispers, I felt nothing but emptiness. I hadn't been back home long enough to unpack my boxes, yet somehow I was already part of something that didn't feel real. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear the crying. I could still see those 6 faces, each one identical to mine, staring back in silence. The police said I saved them. They called me brave, but I didn't feel brave. I felt broken. I kept replaying every second of that night, wondering how long they had been. Down there, how many others might have come before them. I couldn't shake the guilt that maybe, if I had gone to another salon, they might still be trapped. When I visited Lena at the hospital a week later, she looked smaller than I remembered. Her arms were bruised and her eyes were hollow. Yet, for the first time, she didn't look afraid. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. "I didn't think you'd come," she said softly. "I had to," I answered, sitting beside her bed. "You saved me. You saved all of them." She shook her head. "No, Ava. You saved us. You didn't run." There was a long pause. Machines beeped steadily beside her, and outside the window, the sky was pale gray, heavy with rain. "They said he was your brother," I said. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "He wasn't always like that. After our mom died, he started hearing her voice. He thought she wanted him to bring her back. He said every woman I brought reminded him of her, but it was never enough. I tried to leave once, and he locked me in that basement for 3 days. I learned to stop fighting him, until you came. I didn't know how to respond. Nothing I could say would make what she went through any less horrific. I took her hand instead, and she squeezed it weakly. "The girls," she said quietly. "How are they?" "They're safe. They're being taken care of by a trauma team. Some of them don't even remember who they were before." She nodded, staring at her blanket. "Maybe that's for the best." When I left her room, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. She was free, but she would never be the same. None of us would. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise in the house made me jump. The creak of the floor, the ticking of the clock, even the wind brushing against the window. I got up and went to the bathroom to splash water on my face. As I lifted my head, my reflection in the mirror startled me. My hair was still shorter from that day, uneven at the ends. My face was pale, with dark circles under my eyes. For a moment, I saw something behind me, a shadow. It flickered and then vanished when I turned around. My heart pounded, but the room was empty. Still, something about the mirror felt wrong. I stared at it, unable to look away. The light flickered once, and my reflection seemed to shift, just slightly. The corner of its mouth twitched upward into a faint smile. I stumbled back, shaking my head. I told myself it was the trauma, the lack of sleep, the nightmares catching up to me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out of that basement. The next morning, my mom came into the kitchen holding her phone. "You're all over the news," she said. "They're calling you a hero." I forced a smile, but my chest felt tight. I didn't feel like a hero. Heroes don't wake up terrified every morning. Heroes don't see 6 versions of themselves every time they close their eyes. Later that afternoon, the police called. They said they were closing the case. The man's body had been taken for autopsy, and everything pointed to him working alone. But something in the officer's tone made me uneasy, like he didn't believe it himself. After we hung up, I sat in silence. My house was quiet, too quiet. I turned toward the mirror hanging by the hallway. My reflection stared back, calm and still. Then, for just a split second, I saw movement behind the glass. 6 faces, pale and wide-eyed, standing in a row. I blinked, and they were gone. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks. Maybe trauma changes the way we see the world. Or maybe, somehow, not all of us made it out that night. When I told Lena about it during my next visit, she just looked at me and said, "Sometimes the mirror doesn't lie, Ava. Sometimes it shows what we don't want to see." Her words echoed in my head long after I left. That night, I covered every mirror in my house. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it would help me sleep. But the truth is, I didn't want to take the chance, because the police said they rescued 6 girls that night. But when I looked into the mirror the next morning, there were 7 reflections staring back at me. If you made it this far, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes what you see in the mirror isn't just your reflection.